Hey Glazies, how you doing? Shall I say good morning to you or good night? How have you been? I hope all is well. All is well. I hope all is well with everyone. I am so excited about this review, y'all. I really do hope that a lot of you guys had a chance to watch at least part 1, maybe part 2. I mean, I haven't watched all of it because of the simple fact I don't want to get too far ahead of myself and then be discussing too far ahead of myself in the review. So I'm up to part 3 of this series, which is called When They See Us, which is about the Central Park 5, regarding the Central Park jogger assault, attack, rape case. So I know I put it in y'all ear yesterday. Please watch it. Please watch it. I think this is a show that everyone should watch, including your teenage children. Mainly boys, but your daughters too. Your young adults in your family. I have a 22-year-old. He put it on his show. He put it on his cell phone to watch because it's on Netflix. My 18-year-old, he's going to watch it this evening when he get back home. I told them it is imperative. It is important to me that they watch it. They was like, Mom, why you want us to watch this show? And I was like, don't y'all recommend shows to me? Y'all recommend shows to me all the time. All the time. On Hulu, Netflix, cable. They be like, Mom, check this out. This might be something you like or you like to do a review on. So, in return, I'm like, I want y'all to watch this show. And y'all let me know what y'all think. So, they gonna give me their review of the show. But yes, I do think it is very, very important for our youth, no matter what race. No matter what race. Even if it seemed like it was a black, white, brown color thing in the show, which a lot of people do believe and a lot of people do agree on. I think it's imperative for not only us as adults to watch this show, but our youth as well. Because like I told y'all the other day, when I asked my son, who I thought would know better, like he's 18 years old, I'm like, you should know better. I asked him, if you were pulled over by a cop and you were just walking down the street minding your own business or shooting the breeze with your friend, your homeboy, girlfriend, whatever, and a cop pulled over to you, jumped out the car, pulled his weapons out, told you to get out, drop to the ground, put your hands up, put your hands on the car, put your hands on the ground, whatever, what would you do? He talking about I'ma run. I'm like, you gonna do what? He said, well, either that or pull out my cell phone and call 911. I was like, you gonna call the cops on the cops? I'm like, son, I done failed you. I thought I done taught you everything you need to know, especially how to react around authorities, the police, which I have, by the way, but somehow it must have went in one ear and went right out the other ear. Even the Trayvon Martin case, my sons was around here during that time, wearing hoodies, getting hoodies made, posting all kind of stuff on their social media, repping Trayvon Martin, and then you tell me you gonna run? So I was like, yes, son. After we had a long conversation about his response, I told him, you must watch this TV show. So, again, I hope you guys all had a chance to watch it, at least to catch up to where I am right now. I'm reviewing part 2 tonight. Excuse me. For those of you who have not seen the show yet, or for those of you who do not know anything about the show, I'm going to let you know briefly what it's about, and then we're going to get into part 2, the review for part 2. Hold on 1 second. I need to turn my notifications off so my phone don't be blowing up while I'm doing this review. Okay. So, oh, you say yes, you're doing well. That's great. That's awesome. And it is good morning there. Okay, good morning to you in England. I know my English accent is just but good morning to you. It is 7:46 p.m. where I am in the Midwest in Omaha, Nebraska. So it's about to be pretty late. But I figured I'd get started a little early. Last night we was on here till like what? 10:30 or something. I was like, yeah, I think I'm gonna start a little earlier tonight. So okay, let me see. I'm gonna briefly discuss again what this show is about. And by the way, it's on Netflix. If I didn't say that already, it's on Netflix. It's called When They See Us, and it's based on the Central Park Five, about the jogger who was attacked and raped in Central Park on the night of April 19th, 1989. So here's a brief description, and then we're going to jump right into review of part 2. Okay, When They See Us is based on a true story of the Central Park Five from April 19th, 1989. The assault and rape case of Trisha, or Patricia, but I think she goes by Trisha Meidi, Meidi, who was a 28-year-old investment banker. The Central Park jogger case was a major news story that involved the assault and rape of Trisha Meidi. I think that's the proper way to pronounce her name. She was a white female jogger, and she was attacked along with other people who were attacked that night, like bicyclists, a 50-year-old man, a school teacher. She was also attacked that night in Central Park in the North Woods. Again, it was the night of April 19, 1989. The attack on her left her in a coma for 12 days. According to the New York Times, the attack was one of the most widely publicized crimes of the 1980s. On the night of the attack, 5 juvenile males, allegedly fueled by racist tensions and racist rhetorics, that's what they alleged back then, 4 African Americans, and 1 Hispanic. They were apprehended in connection with a number of attacks in Central Park committed by around 30 teenage perpetrators. The prosecuting attorney in the case was Elizabeth Lederer. That's the white lady in the show with the short curly hair. That's Elizabeth. She was the main prosecuting attorney. The 5 juvenile males arrested were 14-year-old Raymond Santana, who is Hispanic. He was the only Hispanic. Kevin Richardson, an aspiring trumpet player. 15-year-old Antron McCray, and also Kevin was 15-year-old as well. So 15-year-old Antron McCray, who was a great baseball player at that time, and 16-year-old Corey Wise. So out of all the boys, the youngest was Raymond, the Hispanic, 14 years old, and the oldest was Corey, 16 years old. Now, I'm going to tell you basically what they said in the beginning of part 2. This is social media back then, aka news reporters, because there was no Facebook, there was no, nobody was all over no YouTube and all kind of stuff like that. Hey Raymond, how you doing? So I'm gonna read to you the description of the story given by reporters back then. This is in 89 and 90. Okay, after the boys was arrested, it was 6 months after the arrest of the Central Park jogger case. Now, again, this is from the reporter's words, okay? Police believe the gang confronted her and then dragged her 200 feet into the woods where the assault took place. A 28-year-old woman hitting her with fists and rocks. 4 of them raped her and left her for dead. She suffered from 2 skull fractures, extreme blood loss, and hypothermia. And she doesn't even remember, and may not ever remember, the vicious attacks. And doctors are saying that the odds of her recovery are still stacked against her. Details didn't matter because there was no script. The boys were coming downtown. Listen what the reporters were saying back then. The boys were coming downtown from a world of crack, welfare, guns, knives, indifference, and ignorance. They were coming from a land of no fathers. They were coming from the wild province of the poor, and driven by the collective fury brimming with the rippling energies of youth. Their minds teeming with the violent images of the streets and the movies. They had one goal that night: to smash, hurt, rob, stop, and rape. The enemies were rich and their enemies were white. Some of the young men who's been arrested in the attack are so young as to be children, who told police they were just out wilding around in the park. And that's why so many are just amazed at the tragedy of this occurrence. Now, we talked a little bit about wilding out. Wilding out, basically, is what New York said at that time was like the new teenage slang for rampaging, like in wolf packs, like a like a big crowd of people, like a wolf pack, attacking people just for the fun of it. Back then, this is the news stories. So back then, the teenagers, they were arrested on a long list of charges, including rape and attempted murder. Some members of the black community charged that the arrests were racially motivated. And you just heard what I read that the reporter said, right? So they believe that they were racially motivated and rushed to judgment. And only two of the suspects, Antron McCray, Yusef Salam, had posted bail at that time. This is at the beginning of part 2. The other suspects were denied bail during a raucous hearing that turned into a screaming match. And Corey Wise, the only 16-year-old of the pack, the wolf pack, was still holding up at Rikers Island. So at that time, and starting in part 2, all the boys were basically juvies, 14 and a couple of 15-year-olds. Being that Corey was 16, he was charged as an adult, and he was placed on Rikers Island along with, you know, what kind of criminals are at Rikers Island. And during this time, what cracked me up? Well, I wouldn't say what cracked me up. What tripped me out? I'm going to say what tripped me out. Something I used, from back in the day, slang. What tripped me out was what our current day, who's in charge of our current United States, what he said back then. Like, did y'all hear what he said? This is a trip. Let me read this, y'all. What he said, the man who's running the United States right now. This is what he said in 1989. Now, keep in mind, a lot of people have always said that Trump has been racist. A lot of people have always said that he was racist. Okay, so during that time, Trump, who is now president, from his Trump Tower building, which overlooks Central Park in New York, he was regarding the pack of teenagers who attacked a Central Park jogger. He said, I hate these people. I hate that they took this girl and brutally raped her. And you better believe it. These is his words. And he even took out an ad in 4, not one New York City newspaper, but 4 New York City newspaper. He spent $85,000 on those ads to take out an ad in 4 newspapers regarding how he felt about the Central Park 5. He said, I want to hate those muggers and murderers. They should be forced to suffer, and when they kill, they should be executed for their crimes. They must serve as examples so that others will think long and hard before committing a crime or an act of violence. Unshackle the police from the constant chant of police brutality. Bring back the death penalty. Y'all know how he talked. Bring back the death penalty. And bring back our police. That is what our current day president said back then in 1989. Years and decades before he was served as the president of the United States of America. So what y'all think about that? And to know, we all know the end results of what happened to the Central Park Five. So what he had to say lately about his comments, his attack on the Central Park Five, those 4 ads back then that he paid $85,000 for. Well, the police said they were there. The police said they were there. So, they were guilty. That's what his comment was as of late. He was going by what the police said, what the DA said, what the prosecutor said, what the police said. And this was before they were even proven innocent or before they were even proven guilty. So, now we're going to get into part 2. Corey Wise, who, by the way, nowadays, Corey goes by Kerry. Back then, he went by Corey. Now he goes by Kerry, and it's spelled Kharey. He changed his name for obvious reasons. I don't blame him. He changed his name. So Corey Wise, Raymond Santana, and Kevin Richardson were all locked up together. They were getting ready for trial, dressed up in their suits, dressed up for a pretrial. It was then that Corey realized all the other people were all the other boys were together in juvie. Like, he had no idea. And remember what I talked about Corey in part 1. Corey, like I said, has struck me as, something, his mind might not be actually at his age level, you know what I mean? And we saw, bits and pieces of part 1 where he was talking I don't know, I wouldn't say I wouldn't call him slow, but maybe mentally challenged. He didn't go to school half the time. He was a truancy. You know what truant mean? Truant is when kids don't go to school. They miss a whole bunch of days. And then the school or the board of education has to file a truancy. And usually in that case, though, back then, it was a little more lenient. Nowadays, if a child is truant, their parents can go to jail. Their parents can face jail time and, fees and all that kind of stuff. So he was a truant student. So he was hardly ever at school, which probably explained, a lot of things about him. Like, he couldn't read. His mental capacity was not at his age range. He was probably 16, but his mental capacity was much, much younger. And again, he couldn't read. So when he realized the boys was all at juvie, he was tripping out because he's at Rikers with the real murderers and rapists and child molesters and, so forth and so forth. Rikers is probably the last place you want to be on earth. So, basically, you could tell from the tone of his voice, his facial expression, that he was having a difficult time at Rikers. Now, they didn't get all into that, but just use your imagination. Just use your imagination. This is a detailed story and timeline of the real story. And a lot of these child actors in this story did an awesome job. A lot of the grown-up actors come from a lot of experience of acting. Some of them are really big stars, like the dude who plays Antron's father, Michael Williams. The dude with the scar who played the gay thug in The Wire. Very famous actors. In this, Felicity Huffman, the one who was just tried and convicted for that scandal, the college scandal, just recently. All those parents, those rich parents paying hundreds of thousands of dollars to get their kids enrolled in colleges, the top schools in the United States, paying people to take tests for them, paying people to alter their scores on their SATs and ACTs. Yeah, Felicity. That's who played one of the prosecutors in the TV show. But anyway, you can tell from his expression, this young boy, that something was very, very wrong with his situation at Rikers. But we ain't gonna get into it. But again, just use your imagination. 16-year-old boy at Rikers, mental capacity, not the age of a 16-year-old, cannot read. Okay? That's all I'm gonna say. Hey, Donna, just being real, how you doing? You didn't get to see it yet? Ciao. Tomorrow, you got to catch up with part 1, part 2, and we doing part 3 tomorrow night. The plan was to do part 2 this afternoon, but my kids had me running around like an Uber driver all day. One son trying to get a new car. The other son, I'm dropping him off, picking him off at work. The other son, I have to drop him off, pick him off at work. Then go look for a new car. Then run to the bank to try to get him a loan. Then run back to the... When I say I done had a busy, busy, long day, I was about to scratch this whole review and wait till tomorrow. I was like, well, maybe I can do part 2 tomorrow after church, and then part 3 on Monday. And then I was like, nope, I'm going to get it out the way. Hey, Aisha. How you doing? But yeah, so basically, again, just use your imagination. You can figure out what was probably going on with Corey and Rikers. So, he had asked about Yusef. Like his friend, remember his buddy? The one that he went downtown with to the police station? Because remember, Corey wasn't even supposed to go downtown to be questioned and interrogated. When they arrested Yusef, his friend, his homeboy, as they would call him back then, he was about to just turn around and leave. Then the cops was like, hey, if you want, you can come. You can come down and support your friend. You can come down with Yusef, to the police station, to support him, and, whatever. And he thought about it for a moment, and he was like, dang, maybe I should go, because if he go by himself and his mom, might... He was like, okay, I'll come. So he went down there with him. And y'all saw what happened to Corey in part 1. He wasn't even supposed to be down there. Didn't fit the description. But they had to make this story work. And they needed something. They used Corey for the glue to try to stick the whole story together, because they knew it was somebody out there who wasn't present. They didn't know who they was. They didn't know what they looked like. But they knew somebody out there raped that young lady in that park. And they had to get a story together. So they used all 5 of them boys, even Corey, who wasn't even supposed to be down there. So he was like asking about Yusef, like, where's Yusef? They was like, oh, he was, bailed out. He was bailed out of jail. His mom's pastor raised money in the church and bailed him out of jail. So he was looking like, well, damn. He was like, are you kidding me? I came down here to support my boy, so he wouldn't have to come down for questioning by himself. And I end up also charged with rape and assault. And I don't have nobody to get me out of jail, but his homeboy is out of jail on bail. So you can just imagine, what was going through his mind, how he felt. I can't even imagine. So basically, you see how the support system turned on him, trying to support his friends, but oh well. And then after that, when I just had mentioned how Trump had paid $85,000 to take out 4, different ads and 4 different newspapers, basically saying those boys should get the death penalty. Somebody back then had called Trump a real estate hustler. That's how they described Trump back then. Not only did they describe him as a rapist, not a rapist, forgive me for saying that. They did not say Trump was a rapist. They described him as a real estate hustler, and they described him as a racist. That's what I was trying to get out. So, what do y'all think about those comments that they were saying about Trump back then? Like, even back then, a lot of people had a lot of negative stuff to say about him, even though he was a multi-millionaire, owned all these towers, owned all these casinos, owned all this property. Even back then, he had a negative impact on a lot of people, and a lot of people thought he was racist. The attorneys for the 5 boys. Robert Burns represented Yusef. Robert, he wasn't actually a criminal lawyer. He was a divorce lawyer. And that was like the full extent of his practice. He had no experience at being a criminal lawyer. No record of criminal law. Mickey Joseph, he represented Antron McCray. And he's actually a criminal defense lawyer. But he was from Legal Aid. Legal Aid. The free lawyers. There was a Guyanese guy. His name, I think they said it was either Colin or Cohen. I couldn't quite understand what they were saying his first name was. But it's like Cohen or Colin. His last name Moore. And he was repping Corey Wise, who now goes by Kerry. But he was repping Corey Wise. And he was like an activist, who was working pro bono. And you know what that reminds me of? That reminds me of this Malia Davis case. How the mother of Malia Davis, Brittany, her representative was not a lawyer or anything, but he was like a Muslim activist or something like that. And then we have Peter Rivera. He was representing Raymond Santana, the Hispanic of the group. And he was a former cop. So again, no lawyer experience, but he's a former cop, so I'm sure he probably knows more about the law than probably the Guyanese dude, or probably Robert Burns. But yeah, a lot of people didn't, Aisha. A lot of people didn't. The only thing that I really knew about Trump back then when I was a young child, I just knew he was rich. And I knew all the rappers would put his name in their lyrics, and they want to be rich like Trump, and stuff like that. So that was like my extent. I learned more about him as I got a little older. And of course, while he was running for president and everything. And But anyway, I'm going to leave my comments to myself. But as far as the last attorney, or the last representative, I should say, that was Howard Diller, and he was representing Kevin Richardson. And remember Kevin, that was the little boy. He was beaten by the cop in the park with the cop's helmet. Like, he beat him across the head so bad, you saw how his face, all this was like, it was messed up. It was messed up. It's a miracle. He has an eye. It's a miracle. He has an eye. So true, all the rappers did put him in their rap. They sure did, Donna. They put Trump was in everybody's rap songs back in the day. But even though none of these boys, even though none of these men, none of the representatives were seen back then as proper defense, good enough to defend those boys. What they did, what they couldn't underestimate, from these men was they might not have probably been the proper defense representatives, but people was assuming, that they're going to fight hard for these guys. They're going to do everything in their power. This is a high profile case. They might not have a lot to lose, as you saw from some of the descriptions of their background and some of them who weren't even lawyers. They might not have a lot to lose, but they had a hell of a lot to gain, because this was a high profile case. So just imagine if things worked out the way it's supposed to, if things worked out the way it should, it should, the way it should work out, then that would make a big name for all of them. A lot of them, And so, as we call it today, it would have brought them a lot of clout. A lot of clout. Ain't that the name that we use all the time in social media? Everybody's out here chasing clout. But then, you know what? As far as the admission of guilt, that the boys made at the police station, which should have been considered coercion, thrown out by the judge, because they were all underage, because they didn't have a parent or a guardian, with them at the time, when they were being questioned. It gave, basically, the authorities thought they had permission to interrogate them. But they didn't. These cops, most of them cops were cops for a long time. They knew what they were doing. They knew what they were supposed to do. They knew what they weren't supposed to do. They know they wasn't supposed to interrogate those guys, especially the one that was 14 years old. Especially the 14-year-old. The other two was 15. The other one was 16. Still, they had them down there signing waivers, signing their Miranda rights. Basically waiving rights to attorney. They had them doing all kind of stuff at 14 and 15 years old without their parents there. Messed up. This is the world we live in. This is the country that we live in. And things still happen like this, y'all. Things still happen like this. A lot has changed, but a lot still has to change. A lot needs to change immediately. So, on top of that, we saw how, they were coercing them. Coercion. I can't never say that word. Making them basically say what they want to say, what they want them to say, making them tell stories, lying on each other's, implicating each other, and it didn't help with them beating on the boys, yelling and screaming at them, throwing chairs around, throwing them around, ramming them upside the walls, slapping them. They was doing all kind of abusive stuff to these boys on top of interrogating them without any guardian around. It wasn't right. It just wasn't right. There was no DNA. No DNA evidence. They had did a cervical swab. It's a rape case. They did a rape kit. Cervical swab in her mouth. Fingernails. Everywhere on her body. Inside and outside. Everywhere. The cervical swab was inclusive. There wasn't enough semen in the victim to test. And it didn't match any of the boys. What they did collect didn't match any of the boys. On top of that, the victim, she didn't remember anything. She didn't remember anything about the attack. Why? Because she was brutally beaten, and she was in a coma for 12 days. So she was unconscious. When she came to 12 days later, she didn't recollect anything that happened. So not only did they not have any DNA, they didn't have any witnesses. They didn't have any weapons. The victim doesn't remember anything. So, but that DA, the one we talked a little bit about yesterday, Linda, the one played by Felicity, she was set on putting this crime on those 5 boys. Why? Because we talked about how hundreds of thousands of women were raped the year before in New York City. A lot of women were raped and attacked in New York City, and they wanted to put a stop to it. And they was like, you know what? If we pin these on these boys that was in the park that night, you know what this will do for us? You know what this will do for our department? We have to put a stop to this epidemic. That's what her mindset was. Even the other cops, even the lady who was trying the case, the other prosecutor, Elizabeth, she was telling Linda, all along, how do you expect me to take this to court? How do you expect me to win? How do you expect me to prove to these jurors and the people in court that these boys did this when I have nothing? I have nothing. So they kept, making the boys, threatening them, lying to them, telling them you can go home if you just tell us what this one did, showing them pictures of the other boys. Only 2 of them knew each other. The only 2 that knew each other was Yusuf, and the other one was Corey. The one with the not so high mental capacity. The one who wasn't even on the list of people to be interrogated. He wasn't even on the list. He wasn't even pointed out by anybody as, he was there. They all were there. They all were there. But out of the people, the people was like, okay, this one was there, that one was there, This one was there. That one was there. They didn't fit the profile. They didn't fit the description. Corey, that is, he didn't fit the description. So when they ran up on him, they was like, "Oh, you ain't who we need." And they grabbed Yusef. And then they talked Corey into coming down there with them. Come support your friend. You can come. It's okay. Get in the car. And again, you see how that turned out. But, so everybody knew. The representatives for the boys, their parents, the entire black community back then knew that this wasn't right. None of this was right. And it was basically a lady, 28 years old, investment banker. She was white. There was a whole bunch of black kids in that park, and one of them black kids did it. That's one of them browns. They said black or brown. One of them did it. So they were set on pinning this on the boys, and they did everything possible. No physical evidence, no weapons, no witnesses, no matching DNA. And on top of that, they're making promises to their parents, the parents who were there, making parent like Antron's parent, what's his name, Raymond, the Hispanic, making promises to his dad. If you just tell us what we need to hear. And then what was crazier was while they were telling them to give them something, like these boys had no idea. They had no idea who this lady was. They did not know this lady. They didn't know her from Adam. So they up there making up stuff because they keep promising you can go home. Just give us what you need and you can go home. Even telling the parents who were there, don't you want your child to come home? Tell your child to talk. So eventually, Raymond, he was telling his dad, I'm just trying to go home. I got this, Dad. I'm going to do what they want me to do. Antron, you saw how they made his mother leave the room because she was all hysterical. So he left his father, Bobby, in there. But he threatened Bobby, threatened his job, told him if he did not make his son, his boy, say what they want to hear, then they were going to let his boss know about his criminal history, about Antron's father, Bobby's criminal history. Because he served time and he had like a rap sheet. Had nothing to do with the boy, had nothing to do with Antron, but he was like threatening him. So Bobby went in there. You saw how Bobby blew up on Antron, told him, son, you got to do this. The cops, they going to get what they want regardless. They going to lie on you. They kill us. They lie on us. They put us in jail. Just do what you want so we can take you home. Antron didn't want to do it. He was crying, snotting, crying. Dad, you taught me not to lie. Dad, why should I say I was there when I wasn't? Dad, why should I say these other guys did something when I don't even know who them other guys is? And he basically told his son. He basically forced his son to say whatever the cops want them to say. That's what happened with all the boys. Y'all saw that part 1. Y'all saw that part 2. All the boys, they made all the boys implicate each other. And what it came down to, from them lying, because they didn't know who the other guys were, they was just like, yeah, he raped her, and he hit her, and yeah, what's the other one name again? What's his name? Okay, yeah, he held her down. And then they thought they were good. They like, we good. Okay, we done told y'all something. Can we go home now? Nope, sorry. No can do. Y'all all implicated each other. Y'all all said each other did something. So that means all of y'all were there. All of y'all were did something. Then did you see how the police was telling them, you just can't tell us this. They ain't gonna believe that you was there and you saw this and you didn't actually play a part in it. So you had to do something. You did something, right? What did you do? Tell us what you did and you can go home. You can go home. So they up there like, dang, what can I tell them I did? The one, Antron, he was like, they said, how'd you get those scratches on your arm? On your face. He was like, he just have to make up something, quick on his feet. She, like, when they were attacking her, I reached my arm in and tried to help her, and she scratched me. Yeah, that's what happened. That's how I got it. Yeah, that's what happened. But I didn't rape her. I didn't rape her. You know, they were implicating each other, lying on each other, and then they was making them also tell what they did, even though they weren't there. So it was a whole mind game. It was a whole mind game. These boys, they were young. They never been in trouble with the law. They just wanted to go home. They just wanted to go home. They just wanted to go home. Like Dorothy and Toto. They just wanted to go home. That's all they wanted. That's all they wanted. Ryan Pierce, you said you watched it last night. You had a breakdown. I was crying so much, man. Man. I ain't even gonna tell y'all how much I was crying. I was like, it was like certain points. Like, okay, what about when, okay, you know how they threatened Bobby, Antron's father? How they threatened him with his job and his past criminal history and everything? I thought that was so sad. How he left the house, hardly came home, was always telling his wife he's working doubles, basically so he couldn't come and appear at court. He didn't come to the pre-trial. He didn't come to any of the trial till it was like over. And his son Antron was like, Dad, why aren't you coming? Where you been? Where you be going? You know, this was his father. This wasn't like his father outside the home, somebody who just pays child support and comes visit him every now and again, or just buy Christmas presents, you know, school clothes, you know, and you know, come and visit every now and again. This was his father who had been living in the home with his wife and their son Antron. Very supportive, hard worker, take care of his son, support him in every activity in his schooling and everything. And then all of a sudden, he gets threatened by the detectives that if they didn't tell his son, I mean, I don't know what else was done, what else was said to Bobby. But we definitely know that they told him if he didn't force his son to say something, he was going to go to jail and not come home. So I'm thinking like, dang, what else did they tell him? Because this man didn't come to none of the court dates. I think he was really scared, like really scared, and he didn't know how to tell his wife what happened, because I'm sure she would have got pissed off. Like, you told my son to lie? You told my son to lie and say he was there and say he partook in this? I mean, come on now. But he thought his son was coming home. He even promised him. He promised all the parents. He promised all the kids that your child would come home. All they had to do is tell us what the other person did. That was real slick, y'all. That was real slick. Real slick. And that's exactly why I said, if y'all don't watch this show, 4 parts on Netflix, When We Were Us. I mean, if y'all don't watch this show and have your teenagers, your children, maybe not your little children, but like 12 and up, your young grown children, you gotta watch it. You gotta have them watch it, because a lot of these things that happen with these children, like when I asked my son, what would you do if you got pulled over? What would you do? And he said all the wrong answers that would probably leave him shot or in the hospital somewhere on an oxygen tank, on a breathing machine, you know, hooked up to all kind of equipment. That's what probably would have happened. So, you know, we had this talk, and I told him, y'all gotta watch this show. Hey, the real Kima Kaor. Hey, how you doing, sweets? Thanks for checking in on us. But yeah, it was like, it was a hot mess. So he wasn't coming to the court, you know, the court dates and everything. And his son was just like, he just didn't know what was going on. Like, my dad, who's been there like every day in my life, is now not coming to court with me. He's not coming home. Even his wife was like, is there somebody else? Tell me if there's somebody else. He said, no, it's not somebody else. He didn't want to tell her what was really going on. So I thought that was crazy. I thought that was real crazy. But then, once, you know, they got their representatives and start talking about each other's case and everything and having the meetings among themselves, you know, the parents and the representatives and the kids, they decided that, some of them decided they wanted a separate trial, especially Yusuf's mom. She was like, my son, His situation is much different, because she was able to snatch him up. Remember last episode? She was able to come down there. She found out where her son, she came down there. She went off on Linda. She went off. Talking about you should be ashamed of yourself. What kind of woman are you? Got these young teenage kids down here without their parents, without their guardians, and y'all interrogating them on a rape case? On a rape case. She was like, you ought to be ashamed of yourself. And Linda was looking at her like, whatever. I was like, that boy. The names I was calling that lady, y'all, I don't even want to say. Just use your imagination. Just use your imagination. But I was calling her all kind of names in part 1 and part 2. But yeah, she was like, I was able to get my son out of there right as he was signing the Miranda waiver, right as he was signing his, rights to attorney and everything. She was able to take him out of there, take him home, get him a representative. So anyway, one of the trials was it was 2 trials. One of them was for Yusef and Raymond. Raymond was the Hispanic. So Yusef Salam and Raymond Santana and Antron McCray. And then the other trial was for Corey Wise and Kevin Richardson. So the trial was underway. And it took forever. It took forever to get underway. The kids was locked up for a minute. Some of them was out on bond, but the ones who were locked up, they were locked up for a minute because they had a potential juror selection of 500 people. 500 people. That's how many people that they had to be potential jurors. Of course, they narrowed it all down to 12, but just imagine how long that took to narrow it all down. So they finally narrowed it all down from 500 to 12 so they could get the trial started. But as far as like that lead prosecutor, Elizabeth Lederer, who after hearing what the so-called evidence, after knowing that there was still no evidence, no matching DNA, no weapons, no witnesses. I keep reiterating that, y'all, because it's important. There was no evidence, no matching DNA, no weapons, no witnesses. She still went ahead to try the case. And it's crazy because she kept telling Linda, how am I going to do this? How am I going to do this? How am I going to do this? She was basically like, make it work. Just make it work. So she went ahead and tried the case. Now, Mickey, the one who was representing Antron, he had told her, he said, these guys is innocent. These guys did not do this. You guys do not have any solid evidence against any of these 5 boys. So could you please, even though you're trying to lock them up for the rest of their life, could you please be fair? All we ask is that you be fair. Give these boys a fair fight. Just from now on, just be fair. That's all we ask. That's what he asked Elizabeth, the lady with the short curly hair. That was the prosecutor in the case. That's all they asked. And you see how that turned out. Aisha, you said nope. But yeah, so anywho, one of the witnesses for the prosecutor, and this was one of the bicyclists. She said she remembered, being heckled, being harassed, her and her husband riding bikes, being terrified by a group of boys. That's what she remembered. Nothing to do with a rape. That's all she remembers. And then another witness for the prosecutors, he was like, when they asked him to identify one of the boys in a lineup, he said, yeah. No, they asked him, was he able to identify one of the boys in the lineup? He was like, yeah, I sure was. I sure was able to identify one of the boys in the lineup. I sure was, boy number 4. I sure was able to identify boy number 4 from the lineup. They said, is that boy here today? Let me use my pen. They They said, is that boy, can you point? Is that boy here today? He said, no. He said, no. He said, no. They asked him, when he was taken down for a lineup, were you able to identify one of the boys from the attack? He said, sure, I did. At the lineup, I did. And they said, is that boy here today? He looked around the courtroom. He said, no. You should have seen the gas. For the people who ain't watching, the people was gasping. The people who didn't watch the show yet, the people was gasping. They was like, this guy saying he saw somebody was there, but he ain't here. He ain't none of the 5. He ain't none of the Central Park 5. So where he at? Who he is? And somebody needs to find him and bring him in, but no. They still gonna go ahead with these 5 because they want to persecute them. Not prosecute. They want to persecute them. So, that prosecutor, Elizabeth, the one that I just don't like, just don't like. And by the way, y'all, after this was all over with, you know, she carried on her life and everything. She wrote book after book after book after book about her prosecuting, you know, her years of being a prosecutor in different cases and all that kind of stuff. And she received some awards and everything. And she got a lot of backlash. A lot of backlash from a lot of people. Like, you got awards? You wrote all these books and got rich and famous off of all these books? After that trial, she received a lot of backlash about that. But anyway, I don't know what she's up to right about now, but if she's still alive and kicking, I would sure like to sit down and talk to her. Like, why? Why did you try so hard to persecute those boys? Like, really, why? But anyway, we'll probably never know, even though a lot of people said it was, you know, it was a racial attack. But anyway, anywho, Elizabeth, she was telling Linda, you know, the lady who, I'm sorry, I'm mixing the names up. Sorry about that. Linda was the one who was, you know, set on persecuting the boys. After she hired Elizabeth, or not hired Elizabeth, but after she selected her to, you know, do this case, she told her, you know, out of this entire fiasco, the boys weren't there. The lady with the short curly hair in the show, who was the lead prosecutor in the show, she told Linda the boys were not there. Do y'all see what has happened here? Do y'all see how it all went down? Like, the prosecutor in the courtroom trying to nail these kids to the cross. She even told Linda the boys weren't there. It was like no evidence that they weren't there. And Linda was like, okay, this is why I don't like her. This is why a lot of people was calling her all kind of names. When they start watching this show from the very beginning, they was calling her all kind of names, including racist. She was like, okay, so what? The DNA doesn't match. So what? The bicyclist couldn't pick out, you know, none of the suspects. So what? The other guy who picked out somebody from the lineup, they weren't even here. They're not even here. Okay, it must have been another attacker. It had to be another attacker. She said, but does that mean that these boys didn't have nothing to do with it? I was like, what the hell? I was like, what the hell? She said, so what? We don't have no solid proof. So what? Somebody else could have done it. So what? But that mean that these boys didn't have nothing to do with it because they were at the park? Lord Jesus. Good night, Donna. Thanks for tuning in. Night. See you later. And make sure you watch the show. We're going to be doing episode 3 tomorrow night. So make sure you watch the show, Donna, so you get caught up, boo. But they had plenty of time, plenty of reasons, plenty of calls to not pursue these boys. But instead, Elizabeth allowed Linda to persuade her to keep fighting. She was like, we got to think about the victim. We got to think about the victim. The victim is the most important person here. We got to think about the victim. 28-year-old Trisha Mighty. We have to think about the victim. She was like, what about the boys? Linda, what about the boys? She said those boys was in the park the same night, harassing bicyclists, wilding out, as they call it, wilding out. And you don't think that they might not have had anything to do with the jogger being raped? That's all she kept saying. So they didn't have no witnesses, no evidence, no weapons, no DNA. But they were there. And they were harassing people. And they was running around acting like goofballs. Like they don't have no sense. So they had to have raped her. They had to. You know, they was trying to make it make sense. They was trying to make it make sense. A phrase that we use today too often. Make it make sense. They was trying to make it make sense. But it was a whole bunch of bull. It was a whole bunch of bull. But anyway, Linda, she was full of shit. She was full of shit. But anyway, in part 1, they had mentioned the year before, in 1988, there was 3,412 rapes reported in 1988. So remember, keep that in mind. Linda was like, they were assaulted, they were degraded, they were held down, they were forced, and they were raped. This is no longer problematic, but now it's an epidemic. And we need to take control of the situation, and we will, starting right now. So again, she had it set in her mind that regardless of how it looks, these boys are going down for this crime. Regardless of how it looks. Hey, Miss Sislo. Hey, one of my moderators just joined us in the chat. You at work? Okay, thanks for peeking in. I appreciate it. But she was determined from the gate, from the jump, to put these boys in prison, ruin their entire lives for the sake of the other 3,412 rape victims in New York City. They were going to pay the cost for the other 3,412 rape victims in New York City from the previous year. So, of course, the trial resumed. Love you too, boo. But after the entire defense team, all the people who was repping the boys, you know, the 5, some of them was lawyers, some of them was an ex-cop, some of them was activists, some of them was a divorce attorney, you know, not really qualified to probably, you know, defend these boys in a case like this, but they basically thought that the victim, Trisha, the victim, that she probably, you know, come on, she has no memory. She doesn't recollect anything happening. So they just figured, you know, she most likely won't be on the stand. She won't most likely be there to testify, and that could help them because she didn't remember anything. All she remembered was being at work, because even though they thought that she probably wouldn't be qualified to stand trial, they actually put her on the stand anyway. And when asked what she remembered about that day, she said, I remember not too much, but what she did remember was being at work. She remembers there was a meeting at lunchtime, you know, with the entire finance department. Remember, she was an investment banker. She remembered receiving a phone call at 5 p.m. to cancel dinner with a friend. But when they asked her, do you remember what time you left work on April 1989? She said, I do not. When they asked her, do you remember jogging in Central Park? She said, I do not. When they asked her, do you remember what happened in the park that night? She said, I do not. But to get a big reaction, since she don't remember anything, and she couldn't be a good witness, They just wanted to get a big reaction out of the jewelry, and it worked. It worked because what they did next was they took out her clothes out of like a big sealed baggie, evidence bag. They took out her clothes, from the night, and they held up the clothes. And they were, I mean, it looked like, you could tell because it was muddy in the park that night. So you could tell the clothes were muddy, they were dirty. I mean, they just probably looked like they reeked and all kind of stuff because they've been holding them so long in this bag. They asked her, are these the clothes that you wore on the night of the attack on April 19, 1989? She said yes. They holding up the clothes. And they showed them to everybody. And they said, what was the original color of your clothes? And she said white. And so that brought out a big reaction from, the people in the courtroom, because just from her saying her clothes were starch white when she left to go jogging, after the incident, her clothes was dark, dirty, muddy. You couldn't see any white at all on her clothes. You couldn't see a trace of white. You would never believe that her clothes was white. And of course they got dirty, and of course they were muddy. I mean, she was dragged like 200 feet from the trail where she was running. She was dragged like 200 feet into the woods. Through the mud, through the brush, through the, grass and, everything like that. So, of course her clothes would be, this just brought a big reaction because people is now starting to picture what was happening or what had happened to her. Hey, Miss Naturally New Orleans, how you doing? Thanks for checking in with us tonight. Thanks for tuning in to our review of part 2 of When They See Us, based on the Central Park 5 from 1989. They also asked her, after the incident, are you suffering from anything, after the incident, after you was in a coma for 12 days? Are you still having, dealing with anything, from that moment? And she started talking about, how she lost her sense of smell. She has trouble walking. And you saw when she walked up there, she kind of walked like real slow, as if like one of her legs was shorter than the other. So she had like trouble walking, trouble with steps, trouble with stairs, and she has double vision because she was beat. She was beat. They said she was beat with rocks, bricks, fists, all kind of stuff. So she now has, a permanent double vision. And then after that, Elizabeth was like, nothing further, Your Honor. Nothing further. And everybody was just sitting there like listening, because the thing about it is, even though they didn't have any evidence regarding these boys, any solid evidence, solid proof that they did this crime, what happened with this woman, I mean, I wouldn't wish that on my worst enemies. That woman is lucky to be alive. She suffered and probably is still suffering. That happened in 1989. This is now 2019. Decades later. What happened to her shouldn't have happened. Nothing like that should happen to anybody. Nobody should violate you. Nobody has permission to violate you. So even though there were certain moments in the show when I was in tears from listening to what the boys was going through, how they was beaten and abused by the officers, the officer of the law, the detectives and stuff, and how they were forced to lie and incriminate each other and lie to them about them being able to go home if they said this, if they, it was moments where you just, it's just natural. I just was like, people in the chat now talking about I was emotional and I lost it, I was crying. It was natural, but even when she started talking about her story, I started tearing up because I'm like, she literally is like blessed to be alive. Thank God. I don't think I would want to remember what happened. I don't think I want to remember. It would be really important. It would have been really, really important for her to remember at least what the attacker looked like. But she couldn't. She couldn't because she was knocked unconscious in a coma for 12 days. She couldn't. So that would have been extremely helpful and important. But on the flip side, I'm like, I wouldn't want to remember that. I wouldn't. That man raped her in every orifice of her body. Every orifice of her body. And left her there as if she was dead. Left her for dead. Probably thought he would never be caught or anything. And then, because of a crowd of 30 or more black and colored teenagers running rampant throughout the park, it had to be one of them. It just had to be one of them. And that's how they came across the Central Park 5. But yeah, she, after that was all over with, and after, they told her she could step down, and after, Elizabeth said, nothing further, Your Honor, Antron's mother, you saw her, she whispered to, I think that was maybe that was Corey's mom. I think she whispered to Corey's mom. And she said, after all that, she didn't say that it was them. And they just looked at each other like, because even though Patricia went through a lot in that park that night and afterwards, she never said it was Antron, Raymond, Kevin, Corey, or Yusef. She never said it was any of them because she had no idea. She had no idea. But, so much confusion was going on in the courtroom. Even the detectives, when they was calling the different detectives up, they was giving different reasons for why this was said, why that was said, why this didn't add up, why that didn't add up. They were like, they were stuck like Chuck on a whole bunch of the questions. Like, when they were asked, what wasn't it really your decision to remove Antron's mother from the interrogation room? Remember when she was acting all hysterical and crying and stuff? Because they was flipping out on Antron. They was cussing at him, slamming down on the desk, screaming at him. You were there, you were there, doing all this kind of stuff right in front of his parents. And his mom couldn't take it anymore, so she started crying and all that. So he got up and removed her. He was like, no, it was like a mutual agreement. We all agreed, that she should probably be removed from the interrogation room. Not true. He removed her from the interrogation room. Nobody else had anything to do with it. And then after he removed her from the interrogation room, they continued brutally interrogating Antron. And then his father, Bobby, that's when he got up and was like, hey, I need to holler at y'all in the hallway. Is there anything I can do? What can we say? What can we do to prove to you that my son was not there? And then that's when the detective started trying to blackmail him. We really believe your son was there and the other boys. And basically, you need to tell your son to give us what we know. If you want your son to go home, you need to go in there and force your son to give us what he knows. He was like, but my son is innocent. He didn't do this. We raised him better than that. He did not do this. If my son say he didn't do this, he did not do this. I know my son. And that's what he was like, where you work at again? I know that company. You been there, 5 years or so? Do they know about your criminal background? Do they know about all the time you served? Do they know about your history? And he was like, but what does that have to do with my son? That's stuff I did years and years ago. What you trying to say? And he was like, all I'm going to say is you better go in there and make your son tell us what we want to hear. And so that's when Bobby went in there, and y'all saw him go in there blowing up, cussing at his son, telling him, you got to do it, you got to do it. We want to take you home tonight, so you got to do it. Just say what they want you to say. Of course, you saw what happened. He didn't go home. He was never going home. He was never going home. They were just being lied to. So, it was a lot of confusion in that courtroom. So they brought that up, and then, they brought the fact up that, the boys, they were pleading innocent for hours and hours. Keep in mind, some of those boys was in there for up to 18 hours. They were in there for up to 18 hours. No food, no rest, no sleep. No phone calls. Some of their parents didn't even know they were there. 18 hours. So imagine, you done been to school all day. You get out of school. It's spring break. You go hanging out at the park. You get arrested that night. And you're there for up to 18 hours later. Imagine how tired these kids are. Imagine how drained they are. They mind. I mean, they hearing the same stuff over and over and over. You were there. Oh, and this person was here. Instead of them giving them the opportunity to say the name of the other people that were there, even if they didn't know, they was telling them the names, showing them the pictures. This person, his name is Raymond. This person, his name is Antron. He was there, right? Tell us what he did. I mean, they kept doing that over and over and over. It was just like coercion at its best. At its finest. Coercion at its finest. The boys pleaded for hours, and the defense attorney was like, actually Mickey, he was like, the one that was repping Antron. He was like, y'all was beating them, y'all was smacking them, y'all was slapping them, y'all was disrespecting them, all of this before their parents or guardians even got there. Coercion at its finest. I'm like, man, this was crazy. But then Mickey, when he got to the forensic science, he said about the cervical swab, the semen sample, discovered from the body. Were you able to find any DNA sample? He was like, yeah, but I told the DNA that the pattern, it was really, really faint. And he said from his observation that the two bands or the two strings, the DNA pattern didn't match Antron's. Mickey was like, okay, it didn't match Antron's. Okay. He was like, so you didn't find any trace of Antron's DNA from the scene? And the forensics guy was like, no. And we only tested the cervical swab in the sock. When they got to that sock, the sock that they had no idea about, none of the defense representatives had any idea about a sock with sperm on. They had no idea. And again, remember, Mickey said, all I'm asking you, Elizabeth, is to be fair. We know you're trying to lock these boys up for the rest of their life, but we also know that you guys don't have any solid evidence to lock these boys up for the rest of their life. So can you just be fair? Just be fair. Give them a fair chance. She never even told him about the side. He turned around and looked at her and gave her this look like, for real? Really, Liz? Really, Lizzie? Lizbeth? Really? You gonna do us like that? Really? And she just sitting there like, trying to play like she don't know what the hell is going on. Looking confused. There was no DNA. No DNA. The detective was like, okay, so you found semen on the sock? And he said, yeah, we found semen on the sock, but the findings were inconclusive. The DNAs didn't match Antron McCray. And so Mickey, the defensive representative, he said, okay, it didn't match Antron's. Did it match any of the other 4 boys? He said no. Man, that courtroom went cray. Everybody was jumping up and down, screaming. Some people was crying. Some people was laughing. I mean, they were celebrating as if they won the case. And the judge, he got his gravel, pounding down, telling everybody, calm down. But it was like, it was nothing there. I just cannot believe how these kids were done, how they were treated. I just cannot. I mean, in a way it's like you can, because how some of them treat some people. You know how some people get treated. You know, sometimes it's like, okay, you probably would have been better if you were born a different color. It is what it is. It is what it is. You it's like you can believe it, but you can't believe it. Like, it's just appalling. It's truly appalling. But yeah, he was pissed off because she was withholding evidence. And that was some important evidence, you know, the semen and the sock. And he told her after that court session, he told her, all we asked for you to do was be fair. Just be fair. How you being fair and the DNA, you didn't tell us that it was inconclusive. You lied. You lied. And her response was, it's no longer about justice. It's now about politics. And politics is about survival, and there is nothing fair about survival. Even at the cost of those boys' lives. Even at the cost of those boys' lives. She was going to win at all costs. At all costs. Politics. It's all about politics. All about politics. But, who's that in the chat? Zakiya Raza? But, so anyway, she said, enough of that. Enough of talking about fair, what's not fair. Enough of that. Let's discuss a plea deal. I guess she assumed that, you know, the boys, you know, were probably still concerned. Their family's probably still concerned that there's a possibility that they could be tried and convicted and sent to prison. So she was like, how about we just skip all that? Skip all the rhetorics. How about we discuss a plea deal? They wasn't having it. None of them boys wanted to plead out because they weren't there. They didn't know it. But to see, the thing that basically got them was because of the coercion, because of the detectives writing down everything that they told them. They wrote down everything, by the way. The detectives wrote down and just gave the paper to them and said sign. Because they were on tape, even though we saw the tapes, we saw how the boys looked confused, they looked scared, they was like, you could tell they was making up stuff. Oh yeah, the lady had on this. No, she had on a shirt. No, she had on jogging pants. No, she had on running pants. No, she had on they didn't know what color she had on. What they was lying about where the location was. They was way north, the location was east. They was like, oh, the location over here. No, the location was down here. No, it was. They had no idea. They were just making up stuff with the promise that if they said what the detectives want to hear, they could go home. So basically, they was like, okay, how about we discuss a plea deal? But they wasn't having it. They said nope. They turned down a plea deal. They wanted to continue fighting. One of the things that they had asked the detective, they said, when you was questioning Raymond, and again, Raymond Santana, he's the Hispanic one. When you were questioning him and asked him what part did he play in the situation, because remember, after they told a story, you know, just telling them what they think they want to hear, so they could leave and go home, the detectives were then like, okay, now nobody's going to believe all this if you don't put yourself into the situation. You got to put yourself in the situation. Even Antron's father was like, my son already told you he didn't have nothing to do with it. He told you he wasn't even there. He done already made up a damn story just so you could have a story, and you told us he could go home. Now you trying to tell him he has to put himself in the situation, in the scene. So then they have to make up, okay, yeah, I was there. I did this. I did that. So Raymond was like, he bent down on his knees in the mud and he started feeling her boobs. And the attorney was like, you know, Raymond's representative. He was like, okay. Was his pants dirty? Were they muddy? Did y'all inspect his clothes? They said, yeah. Did you find any mud on his clothes? Did you find any grass on his clothes? Did you find any dirt on his clothes? Did you find any kind of evidence from the scene on his clothes? And he was like, no. So how the hell you believe this boy when he said he was kneeling down in the mud and touching the lady while the others was doing other stuff? And everybody's in the courtroom like, it was muddy. The area where they was in the woods, it was muddy. The boy and they went to jail that night. So it's not like they had time to go home and change clothes. He had no mud on him, no grass, no dirt, like he was rolling around on the ground, nothing like that. There was like over and over and over again, we just see how there's no evidence. How there's no evidence at all. So he was like, and then Raymond told you the rape was over here where they was at, but the rape was way on the other side of the park. Like, how do you? Well, he just couldn't remember. He just couldn't remember where the rape was. I mean, the boy didn't even know where the rape took place. He didn't know where the rape took place. And after that, the prosecutors, they was like, we rest. We rest. They was like, hey, that's all we got. That's all we got. But the defense, they had one more trick up their sleeve. One more trick up their sleeve. Now, remember, Antoine's father, he had left. He had left the house. He was working doubles. He was doing as much as he could to stay away from the home. On top of that, he didn't come to the pretrial. He didn't come to any of the court dates. All of a sudden, he comes home. He stops at home and he rides with them to the courthouse. Like, all of a sudden, he just out of the blue, he comes and, they use him and put him on the stand. Basically, they put him on the stand because he had told the defense that he witnessed his son. He didn't witness the rest of the boys, but he witnessed his son being coerced into giving up some type of story to the detectives. So he told them how they made his wife leave, how, when in the hallway, what they did about threatening him with his job. And mind you, he was the one working. He was the one paying all the bills. And he was the one helping with the, the fees for court and everything. So he was the man, wearing the pins in the household. And he got up there and he told his story and everything. And Elizabeth, the prosecutor, she was like, you mean to tell me you had your son lie? Like, you had your son lie. So you mean to tell me you raised your son to lie for the sake of his family? He was like, in this situation, yeah, I told him to lie. We thought he was coming home. They promised he was coming home. She was like, you actually believe that they were going to have your son come home? Even if he didn't do anything, but he witnessed it, and he saw this person do this, that person do that. You thought he was coming home? And he told him, he's like, but they told us. They said we can go home. Like, even the dad was like, he told me, he told my wife, he told my son, we can go home. We can go home. And she basically made it seem like he raises his son to be a liar, and basically he lies, his son lies, and it's like, who would believe this story? Who would believe that the cops did this, that they coerced to say this and that, and who would believe that? Like, it never happens. So everybody, on the defense team, like all the boys and stuff, they was like thinking, this is it. This is it. They knew that they would most likely be found guilty. That was like their last card. The defense, that was like their last card. The last card they could play. Again, there was no solid evidence. There was no witnesses. There was no DNA. There was not from the boys. There was no fingerprints. No sperm from the boys. But what they did have was the videos and the statements that the cops filled out, by the way. The statements from the boys and the videotapes, showing them, being, telling the cops basically what they want to hear. So they kind of knew, like, it was a wrap. And like, out of all the boys, the one that was most positive, he finally succumbed to their fate. He was the one who had told Raymond. When they was in the holding cell, Raymond was like, everybody is saying there's no hope for us. They saying we going down. They saying, we going to go to prison. We going, and he was like, man, if we believe that, then we already lost. We got to have faith. We got to have faith. So he was like, Antron, he was like the main one. I'm sorry, Antron, he was like the main one who had faith, who had like the most hope out of all the boys. And after that, he was like, he turned to his, defense representative, and he said, "Thank you, thank you, thank you for doing the best you could. I appreciate you for doing the best you could," because he knew. He knew it was a wrap. He knew they was going down. He knew they was going to prison. His father was their last card, their last trick up their sleeve to try to prove that their testimonies and those videotapes and their statements were all coerced, and that none of them really had anything to do with it. But he knew. And y'all know what? That Corey, the one who was 16, the one who was tried as adult, the one who was at Rikers by himself while the rest of them was in juvie, because of their age. Do y'all know who he remind me of? I kept saying, who does he remind me of? Not looks or anything, but just his whole demeanor, his state of mind, his mindset, his childish-like behavior, not knowing how to read and stuff like that. I was like, who does he remind me of? What situation does this remind me of? And what came to mind was, do y'all remember the Green Mile? Like, do y'all remember that story? The big black guy, his name isn't coming to my remembrance right now. But if y'all can remember his name, put it in the chat. I'm trying to remember his name. The big black guy. But anyway, he played in the Green Mile. And on the Green Mile, he had like he was mentally challenged. He might have been grown, but he had like a childlike mind. He was kind of, on the slower side. And when he had committed that crime, he didn't even realize what he did, that it was wrong. He just, that mental, like, remember the book and the movie of Mice and Men? Do y'all remember that? And how the big guy, he suffocated the girl, and he just, the mental capacity, that's what he reminds me of. Because it's like, he truly, when they put him on the stand, that was really sad. That's another scene where I started crying. I was like tearing up. I was like, this is sad. The things they did to these boys, I'm telling you. But that came to mind when they put him on the stand and they kept asking him, what did he say? And he was like, but they made me say it, and I didn't want to say it. And we kept telling them we were innocent, we didn't do anything. They kept telling us to tell them stuff. And so they asked him to read his statement, and he was like, he couldn't read. They was like, you mean this statement right here? This is your statement. They holding it in front of him. This is your statement. You mean to tell me you can't read this statement to us? I mean, just baiting him. And he was like, no, I can't read. He said, I didn't fill that out. I don't know what that says. He said, if I didn't fill it out, how do I know what it says? So not only did he not fill it out because the detectives filled it out, but he also can't read. So he can't even read what his statement says. So they was like, didn't you say that you had mentioned about a pipe? How you had beat the woman with the pipe? The pipe that was never found, by the way. Never found. In the entire park. That pipe was never found. He was like, they said, I said, what? He said, I didn't say nothing about no pipe. And they was like, read the statement. Read the statement, Corey. He was like, I can't read the statement. And he was up there. That's when he started crying. He was like, I can't read. And I didn't fill out the statement. They lied. I didn't say nothing about no pipe. I didn't beat nobody with no pipe. And Elizabeth, the prosecutor, kept on baiting him and making him more and more upset. And, telling him to read it. And then she was like, just tell us what it says. He said, I ain't telling y'all nothing else. He was like, I ain't telling y'all nothing else because that's why we here now. Because y'all kept telling us to tell y'all something. And that's why we here now. That's why we in jail right now. That's why I'm sitting up on Rikers as a 16-year-old with all these hardcore criminals. Because y'all kept telling us to tell something. And I was like, oh, okay, let me get a minute. That was really emotional. He was freaking the hell out because some of the stuff that was in the statement well, okay, put it this way, all of the stuff, we find out later, all of the stuff in the statements, all 5 boys, was all lies. It was all lies. But he didn't know what was in his statement. He couldn't read. So he didn't know what they had put in the statement. Now, the reason why he couldn't read, of course, because he hardly ever went to school. He probably didn't get the help that he needed. He was a truant, so he always skipped school. So, I mean, that explains, why he didn't read, why he can't read. But still, the bottom line is stuff that he didn't even say. They told a lot of lies. Where they were, who did what, who raped, who touched, who pulled, who hit, who, they told a lot of stuff with in mind of the promise that they would be able to go home. They never went home. All of them were found guilty. All of them were found guilty. The police, they won. They all coerced them to create stories implicating one another, and since they were all implicating one another, they all were proven. Let me put these in quotes. Proven to be guilty. So, out of all the jurors the 500 jurors that were selected, they, 12 of them was chosen. It was, they was the ones who had to determine the fate of the 5 boys. I would really love to see. I'm gonna have to do a little bit of research, do a little bit of digging, because I really want to see what these jurors had to say years later. I would really love to see. So I'm gonna look that up, and hopefully I can find that information for you guys. Because in part 3, it shows like the life of some of them who were in jail, in prison. It shows the life of some of them after they were released. So I definitely want to see if I can find, like, sometimes jurors, they do interviews. They probably done some back then, as well, because it happens a lot where jurors, they get called on talk shows. You guys, what made you guys decide, or was there anybody who believed or anybody who didn't believe? That happens, but I would like to know now, after it's over with, and after, the guys, years later, what they have to say later. Not right after the court case, but how they feel now. If any of them are, still alive. I mean, this was, 89? It wasn't forever ago. It wasn't forever ago, but, it's been quite a while. So, anywho, all of them were found to be guilty. Corey Wise, who actually changed his name later down the road to Carey, Kharey. Corey Wise, at 16 years old, he was convicted of assault, sexual abuse, and riot, per the Innocence Project. He served 12 years in prison for his 5 to 15-year sentence. Of all of them, he was the only one who was tried as an adult. He could have received 26 years in prison, though. Yusef Salam, he was the one who went downtown. The police took him downtown. Corey, being his friend, figured, I better go with him to support my friend while he's being questioned by the police. Yusef, he was sentenced to 5 to 10 years in prison. He was 14 years old. He was released after 6 years and 8 months. Richardson. Kevin Richardson. He served 5. Kevin Richardson, by the way, was the trombone. He was an aspiring trumpet player. He was an aspiring trumpet player. He served 5.5 years of his 5 to 10 year sentence. According to the Innocence Project, he was charged and convicted at 14 years old for attempted murder, rape, sodomy, and robbery. Santana. Raymond Santana, the Hispanic one. The rest of them was black. Santana was the Hispanic one. I always say Hispanic, not to just, highlight him or anything, just to let you know, to remind you they all weren't black. One of them was Hispanic. He was sentenced to 5 to 10 years in prison for rape and assault. He served 5 years from ages 14 to 19. Um, and Kevin, did I say Kevin already? I think I said Kevin already. Yeah, he was sentenced to 5 to 10 for attempted murder, rape, sodomy, robbery, assault, and robbery. He is the only defendant to be convicted of attempted murder in the case. So Kevin, the aspiring trumpet player, he was the only one to be convicted of attempted murder in the case. So that is the end of my review of part 2. Part 3 I'm going to do tomorrow evening. Part 3 is going to be about, the boys discussing the struggles that they had, dealing with prison, dealing with jail, discussing their life, when they came home, the ones who got to come home in part 3, returning back, to the real world. Corey, remember Corey? He was the 16-year-old. So remember he was charged as an adult. So he actually ended up serving more time than the others because the others was juvies. He was charged, as an adult. So anyway, we're going to discuss all of that, part 3, tomorrow evening. For those of you who are not caught up, please feel free to watch 1 through 4 if you haven't started any of it. If you are not caught up, please watch parts 1 and parts 2 and parts 3 because we'll be discussing part 3 tomorrow night. It's on Netflix. Again, it's called When They See Us, the story of the Central Park 5, regarding the Central Park jogger Trisha Meaguy. We always say that name right. I don't know if it's Meaguy, but yeah, you guys, again, the show is really, really good. It gives a lot of detailed information. I gave y'all a lot of information too, but of course, it's a lot more information that I don't cover, in the show. So, you guys, you have to check that out. And remember, even while you watching it, even out if you were impacted like I was, then you will be the same way. With telling your sons, your young teenagers, your young adult children, you gotta watch this. Again, I think it's very important because a lot of people's children have never been around police in certain situations where they are in trouble or where they are accused of doing something wrong and they are innocent. So this whole 4 episode series, it really shows, like, most of us as adults, we already know what to do if we get pulled over, if we, get questioned about something. We know how to act. We know how to say, I need my lawyer. We know how to say, I have the right to a phone call. We know. Children, they don't know that. And for them to see something like this, to see other children who were perceived to be guilty and who were actually pleading innocence to the last second, like pleading innocent from the jump to the last second, and the way the police were treating them and abusing them and beating them. I mean, this would be like something for them to use if they ever had to be, and God forbid, if they ever had to be in a certain situation where they have to deal with some stupid police who might have just had a bad day and want to take it out on the first person he see, maybe somebody who's prejudiced, because there are prejudiced police out there. Still in 2019 there are. It would just help them know how to act and how not to act. And it's sad because a lot of us say, it's sad how we gotta like teach our children or train our children, not just how to grow up, not just how to become productive citizens, but we have to also train them how to react in the presence of a police officer, especially if they are bad police. So anyway, make sure y'all check it out. Tomorrow we'll be discussing part 3. It's on Netflix, When They See Us, true story of the Central Park 5. So check that out. check that out. And anybody who comes in late to the chat, feel free to leave me a comment in the comment section after the video finishes uploading, and let me know what you thought about the show or the review or anything like that. And just hit me up. And don't forget, everybody, like, thumbs up. How back in that, hey, thumbs up, y'all. Thumbs up. But yeah, make sure y'all give me a thumbs up, you guys. I really appreciate it. And as usual, Primetime Squad, in the meantime and in between time, stay safe, be blessed, and I'm out. Deuces.